Finally, the Michigan and Florida delegations, speaking of primaries, there's been a lot of talk about what your campaign would do should it get to the convention. Would you commit today to honoring the agreement made earlier not to seat the Michigan and Florida delegations in the way that had been discussed?
Well, let's talk about the agreement.
Yeah.
The only agreement I entered into was not to campaign in Michigan and Florida. It had nothing to do with not seating the delegates. And I think that's an important distinction. I did not campaign.
Because the press seems to have missed that distinction if that's the case. Because the
they
talk
have.
Is that you agreed not to seat the delegations.
That is not the case at all.
Yeah.
I signed an agreement not to campaign in Michigan and Florida. Now, the DNC made the determination that they would not seat the delegates, but I was not party to that. And I think it's important for the DNC to ask itself, is this really in the best interests of our eventual nominee? We do not want to be disenfranchising Michigan and Florida. We have to try to carry both of those states. You know, I'd love to carry Texas, but it's usually not in the electoral calculation for the Democratic nominee.
Right.
Florida and Michigan are. And therefore, the people of those two states disregarded adamantly the DNC's decision that they would not seat the delegates. They came out and voted. Now, if they had been influenced by the DNC, despite the fact there was very little campaigning, if any, they would have stayed home. But they wanted their voices heard. More than 2 million people came out. I mean, it was record turnout for a primary. And Florida in particular is sensitive to being disenfranchised because of what's happened to them in the last elections.
Right.
I have said that I would ask my delegates to vote to seat Michigan.
So your intention is to press this issue at the convention?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you know, it's in large measure because both the voters and the elected officials in Michigan and Florida feel so strongly about this. And you know, Senator Bill Nelson in Florida early on in the process actually sued because you know he thinks this is absurd on its face that 1.7 million Democrats who eventually voted would be just basically, you know, disregarded. And I agree with him about that.